Today I'm going to teach you some tricks on how to build structure in your dough when you're shaping, even when it keeps flattening out. Plus, how to make these beautiful designs in your bread. So we've all been there where we are ready to shape our bread or our dough and it just has no life in it. And that's always an indication that you've likely underdeveloped the gluten in your dough. There's lots of ways to come back from that during the bulk fermentation. Some big things to keep in mind are using a high protein bread flour, or if you are in Canada, you can get like a high protein all-purpose flour. And using a leaven that is at its peak and really thick and active. And I know that there's lots of people who say that you can make your bread out of sourdough discard. And while that is true, it's not going to give you the same development in the gluten that using a nice pre-ferment will give you. So that's just something to keep in mind. I'm not saying that you can't make dough or your bread out of sourdough discard, but in my experience, your bread is only as good as the fermentation at the very beginning. And so that is your pre-ferment or your leaven. And I have another video talking about that, but I'm telling you that if you can make sure that your leaven is strong and active, you have very little chance of underdeveloping your gluten throughout your process, and it's so much easier. Even if you accidentally leave your dough on the counter and do nothing to it, that pre-ferment will really start to do the work for you. So if you're interested more in that process, I have a really awesome master course that goes through the entire thing and is, pretty foolproof. However, today we're going to talk about what to do if you didn't do that. So maybe you did use sourdough discard, maybe you did forget about it on the counter and you didn't do any of your coil folds during the bulk fermentation. Maybe you ran out of time on the counter and you had to pop it in the fridge for a really long time and it didn't really get into that activity like it would have if you had have left it on the counter a little bit longer. So we're going to talk about what happens when you underdevelop the gluten in your dough and it doesn't have a lot of life left, and how to get that structure back in your dough when you're shaping it. So we're going to show you I'm going to show you how to build structure in your dough when you're shaping your dough. So after the bulk ferment, at that point it's a little bit too late. You can't really keep going with that, but there are ways to kind of add a little bit of extra in there when you're shaping and putting it into the Benetton baskets. So that's what we're gonna go through today. And then I'm also gonna show you some fun ways of scoring your dough once it's proofed and done its thing in the fridge, and we bring it back out just before we're ready to bake it. But one more thing that I wanna touch on is a lot of people attribute their flat dough to over fermenting or over proofing their bread. When their bread goes into the oven and it ends up flattening out in the oven, it ends up being gummy on the inside, ends up having great big holes of inconsistent fermentation. A lot of people are like, oops, I over fermented my dough, or I overproofed my dough. It's almost never that. It's almost always you have underdeveloped the gluten in your dough. And I'm not saying that over fermentation isn't a thing, but if you have a proper ferment or pre-ferment at the beginning, that even if you leave your bread or your dough out on the counter for a really long time during the bulk fermentation stage, it's really unlikely that you're going to get an over fermentation, and you can almost always bring it back and develop really nice, beautiful structure in there. So if you're getting flat gummy bread, it is underdeveloped gluten, not overproofed dough. So this particular dough actually has quite a bit of life in it because I used a decent leaven. But I'm gonna show you some things to do for your dough. If you get to this stage and you're just noticing it's kind of flat, there's not a lot of structure inside the dough, because that's kind of what we're looking for, is the structure inside the dough. That's what's gonna make it puff up and give you all of your nice bubbles inside. So we want them to be relatively even. So if you have to cut some off of one to put on the other, the pre-shape is really important. So basically, in building structure in the dough, it kind of starts way before this, but if you're getting here and you need extra, so we're gonna just kind of, sort of like a coil fold, we're gonna just go around with the dough and gently tuck it in. And then once we get to a point where we feel good about that, we're going to begin to pre-shape it. When you pre-shape, this doesn't mean that the final shape needs to be in a round or in a bowl. We can final shape this. We're actually going to final shape one of these into an oval, but your pre-shape is always going to be in a bowl. Okay, so I have quite a bit of structure going on in these loaves. If you do have a lot of structure going on in the loaves, Kind of want to go around and flatten out those bubbles a little bit. But if you do have a lot of structure going on inside the loaves, when you do your pre-shape, you're going to leave it on the counter for quite a while. So you might cover it up and leave it to sit on a bench rest for like 20 minutes because we want it to we want it, the elasticity, we want it to stretch back out. We want to be able to shape it and be able to manipulate it the way that we want. However, if you're lacking structure, then you only want to do probably 8 to 10 minutes in this bench rest. And then we're going to do the same thing with this one. So you're just tucking under the sides. And this is sort of like you're folding up the dough. You're forcefully creating more inner tension or inner structure, I guess, as you do this. And if it's really sticky in your hands and it's not working, doing this should create enough surface tension that you don't have any stick to your dough anymore. So that it really shouldn't be sticky after this. Typically, if you have underdeveloped gluten, you're probably not going to have a lot of surface bubbles on there. It's probably not going to want to hold its shape very well, and it might even spread back out as you are shaping it into your bowl. So because these have a lot of structure, I am going to leave these to bench rest for a little longer so they spread back out. But if they didn't, then I'm just going to cover them up with a towel and let them sit here for like 8 or 10 minutes. And then I'm going to come right back to build more structure. And I'm going to show you how to build even more structure in the final shape. So those have spread a bit. We're ready to shape them. So we're going to use a round Banneton basket. And then these are my favorite, the paper pulp. So I've linked these if you go back to my page, I have a whole video on YouTube on just the tools that I like, and I've linked both of these, so you can have a look there if you're interested. But these are great, these paper pulp ones, they're awesome. Okay, so we're just gonna move this one off to the side. We're gonna start by shaping this one into our oval. So we're gonna just spread it out. Usually, if you don't have a lot of structure, this part, you're kind of fighting against trying to build enough in this final shape, and it's going to spread out. So what I like to do is create as many folds as I possibly can for the dough to hold as much structure as we can. It's kind of like cheating because, we want to do the structure building in the bulk fermentation, but if you didn't, this is a way to kind of do it. So we're going to come in and we're going to take this and we're going to fold it over. So there's our first fold. Then I'm going to take both sides and I'm going to fold them over. There's our second fold, okay? And then I'm going to kind of pinch those up. So it's kind of going to make like a candy corn sort of shape. Then we're going to fold this up, okay? There's our kind of fourth fold, but it's a bunch of folds. Now this has lots of structure, so I don't technically need to do this part, but I'm going to show you. So let's say you get to this part and you're like, gosh, it's really spreading out. It's not holding its shape, and I really want it to. You can come in, we're going to lengthen this out a little bit. You can come in, you're going to flip it over. Now we have our Banneton basket. When we come up to put this into the Banneton basket, we're just going to fold it together. Okay, then we're going to come in and pinch that up. Again, this probably had a little bit too much structure. I didn't need to do that. It's kind of holding in the center of the Banneton basket. But what that's going to do is it's really, really going to build that structure inside. And I'm not saying that that's foolproof and that's definitely going to work, but it's a shot in the dark if you have some flat dough that you really need to put some structure into. So I'm going to leave this actually because this is starting to open back up because there was a lot of structure in this dough. And what that's going to do is it's going to build a little more extensibility in these edges here, and I'm going to be able to come back and stitch it up. Stitching it up is the very last kind of Hail Mary that you're going to want to throw in there that's going to help keep that structure inside the dough. So I'm going to leave this to sit, and once it does for a minute, we're going to come back and I'll show you how I stitch that up. So for our round one, and really if you have flat dough, the round is the best kind of way to build structure inside of it. It's a little harder to do it with the oval because this one naturally just has so many extra folds. So we're going to spread that out, and then basically we're just going to come around the loaf. There's one fold, And I'm doing the same thing I did with the other one. I'm gonna do another fold. I'm gonna keep working my way around the dough. We're gonna do another fold, and look how big and puffy that's getting. Do another fold, and then final one is gonna go down the middle. And look how kind of big, and then we're gonna flip it over. You're gonna do exactly what you did in that pre-ferment, but look how easily it's kind of holding in that structure now. And that's kind of what I do. I like to make round loaves if I'm lacking structure in my dough, because there's just so many extra folds that you're putting in there, and it just gives you a little bit more leverage. And then plus we're putting it into this really deep banneton. So this is only 7 inches, so it's really gonna hold it in there. Okay, so we're just gonna flip it over and place it into the banneton basket. So same thing, these do have a bit of structure in there, so they're spreading back out. You can kind of see it spreading back out. What this means when this happens, and a lot of people will say this to me like, oh, like when I stitch up my dough, it just separates again. Well, so is mine. So what I'm gonna do is you wanna let it sit. So I'm gonna let it rest, I'm gonna let it spread out. And what that's doing is making these edges stretchier. So the longer it sits here kind of at room temp, you'll see as I try to stitch this up, it's not really sticking together. It's gonna keep spreading out. So what I'm gonna try to do is let this sit long enough that these edges get a little more elastic, and then I'm gonna come back in and then I'm gonna coil fold it. Or sorry, I'm gonna stitch it up. But look, see, those are spreading out. So that's a sign of a lot of structure in your dough and not as much elasticity. It will stay together more if you have more elasticity and less structure in the dough. So you just kind of decide where your dough's at. This is already getting more elastic. Look at this. I wasn't able to do that before, like 2 seconds ago. So the longer you kind of leave this, if you're lacking extensibility in the dough, the longer you leave them at the room temperature, we're gonna come back, we're gonna stitch them up, and then we're gonna put them into the fridge. Okay, so as you can see, this is already spread to fill this banneton, and that's what it's meant to do. That's why it's really important to use banneton baskets, because you really want it to take that nice structured shape. Okay, so this has been sitting for a while. Let's go ahead and see if we can stitch it up. So I like to kind of press together with my fingers. And again, this does not have to stay together perfectly. Don't forget there's a lot more structure in this dough than if you had underdeveloped gluten. But we're just basically trying to sew up the middle. So that's great. That looks great. So we're gonna set that aside. This one, same thing. So there's a couple different ways I could do this. I could do just like a 1 stitch across the center, or sometimes I like to, if I want to really build a lot more structure, I bring it all into the middle. And you'll see, like as I do that, it's really pulling and building structure on those edges. And it's not going to stay like this completely or perfectly, but it's just enough to kind of, again, stitch up that center. We don't want a big gaping hole in the center. We just want to pull it in enough that it looks pretty. Okay? And we have that nice, we want to pull that over because that was kind of opening up. We have that nice structure. And if you're noticing any spots that are kind of pulling apart, try to pull some dough over top. And that's going to really build structure around the outside of this loaf. Okay, so we have our 2. This one isn't really separating at all for me, so we'll cover these up and we'll put them in the fridge, and we'll leave them there at least 6 hours. I like a cold proof for at least 6 hours, and then we'll do some fun scoring. So I know I've done an entire video on here of all the tools that I like to use and linked them, but I'm just gonna go over quickly what I like to score my loaves with specifically. So of course we have our bread mat. These are silicone bread mats. We sell them on our website. They're going to be back in stock really soon. But basically, I just use these in place of parchment paper, and I absolutely love them. And you can just wash them and reuse them over and over. And they're a food-grade silicone, so they're really safe. And then these are some fun things that I like to use to score my loaves. So I like to have some toothpicks on hand, because sometimes it's fun to be able to do your design first before you cut into your loaf, so that if you make a mistake, you can just kind of wipe it off. And I'll kind of show you how that works. This is just a little thing that I can put some extra dusting on the top of the loaf so that it makes the design pop out. Of course, I have my bread lame, And then we're gonna use some scissors today to do some scoring. We're gonna focus on leaves just because we're coming into spring and well, we're almost to summer actually now. So we're gonna do some leaves on both of the round and the oval, and we're gonna use our bread lame and our scissors. So those are just some things that I really like to have on hand when I'm scoring pretty designs in my loaf. If you don't wanna mess with any of that, you can just simply use a bread lame. But if you want to get into kind of some intricate designs, these are some things to have on hand. Okay, so we have our bread mat on top. We're just going to take this and flip it over. So it comes out. So with my round one, I didn't actually put any flour in my banneton because I already had some liner in there, so I didn't have to. So I want to go around, and sometimes it helps a lot to wet your loaf before you do this. So if you have like a sprayer, like a little spritzer, you can wet your loaf, and then the flour will stick to the loaf a lot better. Okay, so we're just gonna go around and just cover that whole surface with some flour, and then I always like to come with my brush. This is just a pastry brush. I like to wipe the flour out from around it because ultimately if this goes into the oven with flour all over it, it will burn. The flour burns, so I like to kind of take that out from underneath. Okay, so then I'm going to come in with my toothpick and I'm just going to trace along because there's a cross or an X in your banneton. So I'm just going to come along and just kind of trace that. It's hard to see the indents in the video, but you can also use a string and just kind of make an X on your. This is gonna help me as I do my leaf. So now we're gonna come in with our bread lame, and I'm going to just make an X in the middle. And those are gonna be the starting points of my leaves. So I'm just gonna come around and just kind of curve it in at the bottom there. Same thing on this side. We're gonna turn it. So I don't have to do this side, but I do have to come down here and do the curve down here because we obviously want the leaves to be shown on both sides. And then we're gonna come around on that side. Okay, so then we wanna use our leaves. So we're gonna go up. So if we were doing trees, we would be going down, but we're gonna go up for the leaves. So we're gonna just start, and it doesn't have to be perfect. Some can be deep, some can be shallow. You're just gonna come in and make your lines for your leaf. Okay, so now we're gonna come in with our scissors, and we want these to kind of lift up off the loaf. So we're gonna come and trim these corners. But then I also really want these leaves to be popped out as well. So I'm gonna just come down the side. These scissors are just, I bought them, like they're just hair scissors that I bought and I use exclusively just for my bread. Okay, so there's our leaves. We're gonna put those into the oven. Okay, and we're gonna do a similar design, only in an oval version. So this does have some flour on the top because we had to flour into the banneton. So this one is a little different. You want a leaf at the top, so we're gonna come, I like to use my toothpick. You're gonna make sort of like a big S. You're gonna come in with your bread lame. Okay, and then you're going to take the sides as your big leaf. Okay, there's one, And then same thing on the other side. And then we're going to do the same thing that we did over on the other one. And then we're coming in with our scissors. We're going to lift those corners, give them that good lift, and then trimming down the side. Okay, so then there's our oval leaves, and we're gonna get those into the oven too. Intricate designs are not made for underdeveloped gluten. So if you're having problems with your dough, developing structure on the inside, and you're noticing that it's flattening out when you're trying to shape it, you're not gonna go ahead and spend a bunch of time scoring intricate designs. It's just gonna make it flatten out even more. This is for dough that has a lot of structure and it's been fermented properly in order to sustain standing there and working and intricately making these designs. When you have underdeveloped gluten and you're having trouble with your dough, just do like a straight, easy score, pop it in the oven so that you have, your best bet at success in a nice oven spring. So again, wetting your dough is really helpful to helping the flour stay on the loaf. This kind of fell off a little bit when it went into the oven. But even with these were really well structured loaves, but they had to sit for a while I was scoring them. So this one got a really nice ear on it and lift it up, but they could have had a better oven spring than this, and had I done just a straight score, they would have had a beautiful oven spring. So that's just something to keep in mind. Intricate designs are really fun, and they're fun to gift to people, but you really need a lot of structure in your dough in order to make that work. So we'll let these cool, and we'll cut into one of them and see what they look like on the inside. So this is still a little warm, but I'm always impatient, so we're gonna see what it looks like. All right, so a little bit of fool's crumb there. Again, this is quite warm. Do as I say, not as I do, and definitely wait for your bread to cool. A little bit of fool's crumb up there, a little bit of fool's crumb there, but otherwise pretty decent, and it's nice and fluffy. So that's the inside of the loaf. Again, I think if I hadn't have done the intricate design on the outside, I probably would have had a better oven spring with this, but here we are. So thanks for learning more about sourdough with me, and make sure that you like and subscribe for more videos like this one.